Okay, morning everyone. So I'm Fiona McClay and I'm going to talk to you today about a better way to keep track of tasks in your law firm. Now, this started out of, really it was a discussion that happened in a Facebook group about what's the best practice management software. And so we're going to look at that today. Sort of the eternal problem that there's never enough time to do everything. And once you start managing a team, then that's really exacerbated. You can sort of get this feeling like you're the mother hen and you're doling out one job at a time. But if you take your eyes off for a second, nothing gets advanced. So even if your team's 100% diligent, you're waking up at 3 a.m. wondering if somebody missed a deadline. You're the one who sort of notices on Friday that everybody's been so focused on this week's jobs that they haven't noticed there's a big deadline due on Monday. So you have to head into the office over the weekend and do a last minute emergency rescue job. So we want to try to get away from that old top-down task allocation model. What we also find is that every lawyer in the firm has their own to-do list. And that's great. I have a paper to-do list. It works. It's just that it becomes increasingly unworkable once you're trying to work in a remote environment or where some of the team is remote. It's hard to see who's flat out, needs a hand. It's hard to see who has capacity. And in an office, you can sort of walk around and take the temperature fairly quickly, but it's harder to do that working remotely. And so that's why we're sort of looking at some of the software that's come along, and that's just a sample of them. There's hundreds more. And so the answer then is, what is the best project management software? And my answer is that, like exercise, the best one is the one that you're going to use and the one you'll use consistently. If you don't know how to use the software, you probably won't get the most out of it. And so today we're going to walk through a way that you can set up the system in a really versatile visual framework that you can use to allocate tasks to team members and keep track of progress of those tasks. I'm going to show you how to do it using tools that you get as part of Microsoft 365, so you don't need to buy any of these systems. But if you already have this system and it's working, by all means, don't start again from scratch. You might want to tweak it a little bit with some stuff you pick up today. I'm really trying to talk to the people who either have a system that isn't working or haven't got a system at all. And I'm suggesting a few frameworks you might use. But the perfect project management system for your law firm is like the perfect pair of shoes. You have to try a few and work out what works for you, what works for your business, the way your team works. So I'm not prescribing that there's only one way to do it. I'm just trying to give you some ideas of things that you might want to try. What we want to get to this place where your team knows what they have to do and they're working along. You know at a glance what you have to do, what's coming, how busy your team is, and how busy it's going to be. You can share some of that work of tracking and monitoring with your team. So you're getting away from having those siloed to-do lists. And there's less need for you to be always assigning tasks and then the next task. You can confidently step back and know that you've got a bit more time to jump in if there is a spot fire and you need to help. Now, I know some of the people who've registered for today, but not everyone, so you may not know who I am. I've been working in litigation for over 25 years in New South Wales and Victoria. I'm currently working part-time as a litigation lawyer on a contract, and I also consult to law firms who want to work in a more tech-enabled way so that they can fall back in love with being a lawyer. this is how I got here. I started as a summer clerk at Coors, and I was admitted in 1997. I worked with the team at Coors, and then we moved to Spark Helmore, doing defendant insurance work. And that was work that required a lot of volume. And so that those, even back then, that was in the 90s, they had workflows and some automation. After that, I moved to a small firm in the city and we did commercial litigation. And slightly different puzzle there. We had lots of good work, but we had no team. So I had to work out how to use tech just to get things done. I also learned a lot about this time from my wife, Veronica. She worked in software startup companies. And I just really learned a lot from her about how they managed getting lots of work done with minimal resources. And I'm going to take you through that sort of agile framework in a second. I ended up, I really wasn't enjoying that full-time litigation. So I started learning as much as I could to try to find a life that I could do good work, but wasn't just a daily grind. And that's how I came to start working as a contract lawyer, working in new law and then in-house in financial services, which was another place I learned a lot about project management because we were dealing with regulatory notices. And I was working with some really excellent, experienced professional project managers who taught me a lot about coping with deadlines, managing stakeholders, working under pressure. And now I'm a consultant and I'm sharing all of the stuff I've learned on this journey with members of the profession so that basically that they can get more out of the work that they're doing. I also have been studying for a graduate diploma of legal business at College of Law. I have a certificate in legal practice management, and I'm a geeky guru for the College of Legal Innovation, which means that if you have some tech questions, you can ring me up and have a free 15-minute consultation. Okay, I just want to start quickly. Why does project management help law firms? Why do we need to bother with this? We're a profession that's constantly working to deadlines and highly regulated process. I talk a lot about litigation because that's the world I've lived in, but it applies to other areas as well. And so what does good project management help you to do? At a micro level, it enables you to see what work needs to be done and when. It enables you to communicate and set expectations with your clients and other stakeholders. And that can be barristers in court for me, but it could be the regulator, it could be a government department, it could be the other side you're negotiating with, it could be the other advisors for your client. It enables you to predict workload and revenue, helps you to manage the cash flow, and it helps you to start implementing some standard systems so that you can reduce errors, avoid unnecessary work or rework, and really help delight your clients. And there's certainly a trend, at least in the US, where clients will pay for legal project managers because they really do value that certainty around knowing that the legal work will be delivered on time and on budget. So what are we going to do today? We're going to go through how you can use a visual framework to allocate tasks using, and it's a terrible name, but Microsoft 365 has compiled 3 different products: Outlook Tasks, Microsoft Planner, and Microsoft To Do app. And they've called it Task by Planner and To Do, which is a complete mouthful, but it's very useful. And I'm going to take you through that in a bit of detail. Then I'm going to cover what an agile framework might look like in a law firm. And then we're going to do some traps to avoid. And I'm really going to encourage you to listen out for one thing. We're going to share a bit of information here, but it's really important to find one thing, latch onto that and take that home and try it. Not take that home, you probably already are at home. It's really, what happens is you hear this stuff, it sounds fantastic. Within 24, 48 hours, you've forgotten 50% of it. within a week you've forgotten nearly all of it. So I really want you to encourage to try to implement one thing within that 24, 48 hours. And I'm going to send you an email and I'm going to encourage you to share that one thing with me. You don't have to, but I think it's a really good habit to try to tell somebody else what that one thing is and put it into practice. So we're going to start with Kanban boards. This is a Kanban board in Trello. Some of you might have seen it. Kanban means card in Japanese, and it's a system that originated in the automotive industry in Japan. Every task gets entered on a card. You start on the left-hand side of the board. As you work on that task, you pull it out of the backlog pile, you put it into your doing bucket. After you've worked on it, it either gets blocked, you can't finish it because of some reason, or it moves to done. That's the simplified format. You can have different buckets, you can have more buckets, you can call the buckets different things. I don't only use this for work, I use this for personal admin when I'm moved house or planning a holiday and I'm buying Christmas presents. I know other people that use it for their families, but the idea is that it's a communal, it's a collaborative exercise. Lots of people have access to this. So what does that look like in Teams? This is the blank Teams board. So when you go to set up you might have your Teams here. What you were looking for is this little button here, and that allows you to add an app. And the app we want is this task by planner and to do with the terrible name. And you can call your different, you just create a plan, give it a name. And this is what it looks like, a blank page. You start adding your buckets. And so it prompts you to add a to-do bucket. And so I've set up my standard buckets. You then add a task, and you can see there are a certain number of fields. You describe the task, you can assign it to a member of the team. There are some coloured labels. There's progress, not started, in progress and completed. There's a start date and a due date, priority. You can add some notes and you can attach a document to it. This is what your board looks like once you've populated it with some of these tasks. You can see that one's been labelled a colour. This one's been assigned to someone. Once you complete them, you mark it completed, it crosses through the task. So you probably don't really need that done column, but I find it psychologically satisfying to move them into the done column. You can expand out the sub-elements of that task with these checklists. And as you work through each one, you tick them off. You can also make a comment. So this would be either an email or a team chat. And so that would be Chloe telling me, yeah, that letter got sent on the 15th of April. And that comment will stay attached to the task. You can set email reminders of the tasks that are due within 7 days. And so you can see on that one, the task that's been crossed out is no longer on the to-do. You can also set it up to get a weekly to-do list that will get emailed to you of all your jobs that have been assigned to you. If this is what it looks like, if you make a comment on the task, it comes through and you can either reply to the email or the chat, or you can reply in Planner itself. You get a link taken back to the plan. So it's a live collaborative tool. Everyone has access to it. You may want to choose to give access to your clients or to a barrister. You just have to depend on what you decide to put in there. If you are working on a high volume transaction, just the telling people where things are up to can become a job in itself. So this sort of tool could take away that problem, and everybody can just look at the plan and they can, as long as it's being updated in real time, then they don't have to ring people and chase people to find out where things are up to. You can then look at your planner in a calendar view, and this is not your Outlook calendar, but this is just taking those tasks and showing them across the next month, or so you get an idea of what's coming up. If there are tasks that are going to take a couple of days, you can run them across the dates. You can also look at the task list as a chart. So that's giving you a bit of an insight of where things are across the team, how many members have got stuff, where things are up to. And, so that's how that works. Once you've got that system set up, what do you do with that system? Because just creating it and putting the data in it isn't necessarily going to transform your business. So this is where we're going to talk a little bit about what the Agile framework might be able to help with. Agile came out of developing software, and it's based on the maxim that the best measure of progress is working software. So it gets away from that sort of mapping out the entire project in advance and costing and scoping it. And it recognises that once you start doing the work, things can change. And that applies to law all the time. You know, the matter that you thought was going down one track suddenly goes the completely other way. All your planning is completely redundant. And look, this is a sort of real bastard version of Agile Manifesto, but I just think it's interesting to understand the way other businesses run these products. And Agile started to move into the corporate world, and people are even in quite large companies are setting up, rather than having set teams, they're starting to use Agile scrums. And the way it works is that you set a short-term goal, and which is called an epic, and that's to deliver a certain outcome or deliverable. And you collect a team of the right subject matter experts to deliver that goal. And there's a scrum leader. They assign tasks to the scrum members. And you break down the work you need to do into a series of sprints, which are a defined time frame of a week or a fortnight. And you recognise that as you complete those sprints, the work that you need to do to get to that epic outcome might change, but you know what you want to achieve and a time frame. You're just a bit more fluid about what you're going to do to get it. You might find you work in one scrum for one project, and then in the next project you're working with a completely different scrum, because that you've got expertise that they need to do that next job. So it gets away from having those sort of set functional parts of the organisation, and it's a more adaptive and adaptable approach. So during each sprint, there's a daily stand-up, and the only topic for discussion is what you're working on that day. And the next day, you say what you did, whether you finished that job you were going to do, and if there's anything that's preventing you from finishing it. And that's not there to workshop or problem solve what's preventing you. It's really just to note that is a blockage. And so offline, there's another discussion about how to fix that problem. In a legal context, the way, and this has come out of in-house counsel, which is perhaps a slightly different environment to aggressive litigation. But the way that Agile's been applied there is to look at all of the jobs that that in-house legal department has to do in a week, put them in the to-do list, allocate them out among the team members. The managers were given a 60% load of actual doing tasks to reflect that they had management responsibilities and needed to be available to executives for urgent advice. If new work comes in and the team is fully allocated, then the business who wants that work done is told, well, if you want it done this week, we'll have to take something else out of the to-doing bucket. What do you want that to be? And so you have an interactive discussion with the client about what is the priority for this week, given there are finite legal resources available. Now, again, in private practice, it's a slightly different conversation. I just think it's interesting to think about that concept of having a visual representation of what is on your plate, what's possible, and so that you are going back to the client, whether it's in-house or private practice, with a bit more of a nuanced response than, oh yes, I'll get that to you. It's a bit more of a, well, I'll be able to get that to you in 3 weeks because my team is fully occupied, but you'll have it in 3 weeks. And again, I think clients are more amenable to, I know I'll have it in 3 weeks, rather than being promised they'll have it next week and it actually not turning up for 6 weeks. But again, that's a different conversation, and you just have to work out whether that's useful to your team or not. So I think that the way that a visual tracker can help you, you could use some of the colour labels to flag work that's of a particular value. If you're trying to get an insight onto what this week's revenue is going to look like, and you could, every matter that's going to be over $1,000, you could flag in yellow, and then you'll have a quick snap of, well, okay, well, it looks like there's $8,000 coming out of those matters this week. You could look at the calendar view and you could see what your resource load is going to be like, not just this month, but for the next few months. And also, if you're working collaboratively to have all these tasks on that central planner, team members can help you manage your workload. They can, oh, I can see that job's due. I can do that, or I'll get started on that now, and you can review it later. Instead of that, where you sit there with all this work on your desk that you haven't even realised that is there, and it becomes this last minute hospital pass of, I know I should have got that to you earlier this week, but it's due tomorrow, so can you just turn it around? You're trying to get away from that sort of where, again, it comes out of the silos, work sitting in an email, in an inbox that other people don't have access to, and getting the work out into a collaborative space. What are the traps? And yes, that is a photo of a very young Jack Russell puppy that I babysat, and you have to look after it. You can't just set up your Kanban board and expect that it'll just all go smoothly now. You really do need to make sure that it's being updated and that those due dates are right. Because what happens is, once things become wrong and you're getting email reminders about dates that you know are wrong, then you start not trusting all of the email reminders, and then this way madness lies. You want to keep it simple. You can see there are only a few fields in there, and I think that's deliberate. You don't want to make filling in the task more of a job than actually doing the work. You can use those sort of standard templates to populate the checklists within tasks. But you want to keep the tasks at a pretty high level so that you're not writing down every one-line email that the team has to do, but you're managing the slightly bigger level tasks and breaking it down into subtasks where, as a guide as to how much work is involved in those big tasks. The leader or manager is going to need to drive adoption of you and using this. If you decide to have those sort of daily stand-ups to run through what's on the board, what progress has been made, what's next, that if you're going to do that, that stand-up needs to happen whether you're there or not. And the purpose of that stand-up meeting is just to review the board, what tasks are on the board, what progress has been made. You have to not descend into how do we solve that problem? And people are going to want to know that. So you're going to have to schedule time when you can answer that so that you don't become a blockage. You just want that stand-up meeting to be short and sharp so that people come and they get on with their work. The other trap is with a lot of the project management software is offered on a free basis, and you just want to check where your client's confidential information is being stored if you're using a free version. I mean, you could do it without using any confidential information, but then you're losing part of the advantage of being able to attach the draft to the task card, or really being able to describe the matter in a way that everybody will understand what's being talked about if you're trying to not use identifying names or information. So just recapping, we've run through a tool that you can use within your team to manage, allocate tasks and to keep track of progress on those tasks. We've looked at Agile framework in a law firm, how that could work. We've looked at some things that you need to avoid. And that brings us to the one thing. And I just want to really encourage you to just take a second now just to think about what your one thing might be. If you're thinking that your one thing is, I'm going to show this webinar to my team and tell them that they have to use Kanban, my personal experience is that doesn't work. I tried it. You might have a more cooperative team. But look, people have their own ways of doing stuff. Unless you can really go through a bit of a change management piece around why we're all moving to a collaborative calendar or a collaborative to-do task management system, you're going to struggle to get adoption. People will just wait until you lose interest in it and then they'll keep on doing their own thing. So, and it also needs to be a real discussion about how people are managing their own workload, because if people are managing, you don't want to break that by insisting that they all come and join a different system that appeals to you. So it has to be a bit more of a discussion than here's a great tool, you should use it. Having said that, I think it's a really worthwhile discussion, particularly if you are trying to move to fixed fees, value pricing. This sort of focus on outcomes has enormous potential to help you to really feel in control of the work that the team is managing and the financial performance of the firm, because you can be measuring how many of the deadlines and that those tasks are getting completed on time. There's lots of information you can be getting that isn't just tracking billable hours. And the other reason I think it's worthwhile persisting is because I think you can be getting to this place where your team is all aligned. You are all working in a way where you know what you have on your plate, you know what the critical deadlines that are coming up, you know who's working on them. Anyone can get an update on where things are at just by looking at the board. They don't need to call or email you. You'll be able to see who's busy in the team, and you'll be confident that you can respond if someone has been busy for too long, because you know what other resources are available. It's moving away from being that mother hen with the memory of an elephant. but instead being part of a team who all know where they're going and are ready for what comes next. So I hope that's been helpful. If you would like to find out more about things that you can do to improve the way your law firm works, I'd encourage you to subscribe to a newsletter I put out. It's called Fiona's 5 Things, and it's going to be 5 simple tips that you can use, really focusing on making the most of the tools you have available, so you have to buy more stuff. If you subscribe, you'll get my ebook on 5 ways to future-proof your law firm. If you would like to talk more about how you could take some of these ideas and put them into practice in your law firm, you can book that free 15-minute consultation with me, or I'm also available to work with law firms on a project basis. So I'll just see if anyone has any questions. That was what I wanted to cover. Perhaps if... I'm just looking in the chat. Question, how do you pin a doc to a task? That's a good question. Let me go back and show you. Add attachment. So because you're working in your office or your Windows 365 environment, if you have documents saved in SharePoint, you can attach them. If you had documents in another document management system, it might not be quite as smooth, but that's how you do it. Somebody's asked, how long would you conduct a trial of Kanban? Would you pick something small to start with, show the yes, I would suggest exactly that, Anne-Marie. I started doing it myself, so I sort of understood how it worked. You might want to pick a couple of keen team members and get them to start working with you, or maybe pick one particular matter or one project or one transaction and get a bit of a small win there. Jennifer Harris asking if you can invite people to your team as the matter moves along. Yes, you can. And that's the beauty of teams. You can add people, you can remove people. And if people do come in halfway through, they don't have to then read through a whole ream of someone else's emails to work out what happened. They can see on the planner board where things are at, and they can be assigned the outstanding jobs. So it's a much easier way to get a handle on what's happening. Somebody is asking me what is the Cortana tool and how does that communicate with the task manager? Cortana is just the way of giving voice instructions to the computer. So you could tell Cortana to add a task to your planner, for instance. I haven't used it a lot, so I'm not sure I can answer that any further, but happy to talk about that with you offline if you're interested in working out how that could integrate. Jennifer's asking if you can drag the Teams chat task to your electronic file. Yeah, and look, this is a bit of a problem, I think, in law firms where you've got your document management system somewhere else in a different software product. I was using this in-house where all our stuff was in SharePoint. So our Teams chat was our part of our electronic file. So, but yes, you totally can export it, and so you'll have a record of it. And although it's a bit clunky to have it in 2 places, the benefit of having everybody just being able to jump into the chat, see exactly what's happened on that channel, I think it's worth considering, even if it does mean that there is going to be 2 places where the information's being stored. Kara's asking, do you need to find a person to manage the boards? And yeah, that's a really helpful thing to do, to have one person who is responsible for going around and asking that question of, has this been done? Well, what's the new deadline? And a bit of sort of board hygiene. It definitely shouldn't be the leader. You should be expecting your team to update the boards, so that shouldn't be a huge job. But if you grow to a certain size, some organisations do employ a person who is responsible for keeping those boards in shape. And yes, that person would be running the stand. That Scrum leader role would be running the stand-up meeting, so driving through the checking what's happening on updating the boards. But you'd be doing it live time in the meeting to update the board. If it hadn't been, the expectation would people would be updating the board before they came to the meeting. But if in the discussion it became aware that you need to fix things, you just do it then and there. Okay, I think. Okay, so Kara's just saying she finally knows what a Scrum leader does. Don't quote me. I'm not an expert by any means, but that's my understanding of what the role does. And Agile's a whole nother world. We could spend a couple of hours talking about that itself, but that's the basic thing. All right. Well, look, thank you very much, everyone. And unless there's any more questions, I think I've answered those. I should have been marking them off as answered as I went. But I will let you get on with your day. Oh, hang on, here, there's another question. Is there an element of trust by leader that the boards will be updated properly? Look, yes, I completely understand that. But you will be working with the board and seeing the documents. So I think it's a bit of an exploration, but hopefully your team will understand the benefit of that board being up to date too. And I mean, if you had a calendar system that you were working with now, you'd be relying on your firm to properly diarise due dates and dates of meetings. So it's you will have the same level of comfort or discomfort that you have for the planner board. It's just that everybody's looking at the same due dates. And I suppose that's another reason why you'd want to make sure that important dates are double checked and two people check that date's been calculated right. So that, but yeah, you do have to at some point just trust that people are doing their job properly. All right. Well, thank you very much. People are just saying thank you. So that's really helpful. Don't forget your one thing and please do share it with me. I would love to hear what you are trying and what works or doesn't work. Okay, thanks everyone.